Every world war begins with an alliance, not always formal, not always declared, but when great powers team up against the global order, history shifts. Today, that alliance might be forming.
China and Russia now call their relationship a no limits partnership. Two nuclear powers, but different cultures, different interests, different capabilities, but both united against the West.
Is this the start of a new axis of power, or just two autocrats watching each other's backs?
In this video, I will explain the real story behind this uneasy alliance, what binds them, what divides them, and whether the US can stop them from reshaping the world order. The stakes are higher than they look. This isn't just about war or peace, it's about the kind of world that comes next. China and Russia were already getting closer militarily, economically, politically, even before the war in Ukraine. But the war has accelerated the things between Russia and China. Still, it has not turned this relationship into a real alliance. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, China did not send troops or tanks, but it did not condemn Moscow either. So this is a very delicate relationship.
The war in Ukraine was a turning point in China-Russia relations. It pushed the two closer diplomatically, but also exposed how far apart they really are. In the early days, China and Russia were not coordinating closely on Ukraine. It just wasn't part of their shared strategic priorities. But as the war escalated into a front line of East versus West, or democracy versus autocracy, Beijing and Moscow found common cause in opposing the United States. China embraced Russia's diplomatic messaging, defending its security concerns, opposing NATO expansion, and rejecting sanctions. Chinese state media amplified Russian talking points, but this was symbolic support, not operational. Behind closed doors, Beijing was careful. No direct weapons, no intelligence sharing, no real military help. China did not vote to support Russia at the UN. It abstained. It did not recognize the annexation of Ukrainian territories. It called for diplomacy and quietly told Russian officials not to use nuclear threats. Even Chinese banks complied with sanctions, yes, American and European sanctions. Many pulled out of risky deals, suspended services, or blocked tech exports. That's not exactly what you would expect from a no-limits ally. Beijing is hedging. It supports Russia's narrative, but not its war. It's playing both sides, signaling loyalty to Moscow while keeping doors open with Europe and the US. Still, China and Russia are growing more economically interdependent, especially after sanctions. Chinese goods flooded into the Russian market. In 2016, China overtook Germany as Russia's biggest source of industrial tools. By 2022, Chinese smartphones, machinery, and consumer goods had become essential in Russia's economy. Economically, they fit well together. Russia has energy, China has manufacturing, its classic complementarity, and both sides are using it to reduce reliance on the dollar, US dollar. About 25% of their trade is now done in rubles or yuan. That's expected to rise even further after a 2024 gas deal paid in both currencies. Now, what about the military side? China and Russia regularly conduct joint drills. But don't be fooled. These exercises are for show, not for war. There is no joint command, no integrated planning, no treaty, and no scenario where one jumps in if the other gets attacked. However, it doesn't mean there is no coordination. According to the analysts, China and Russia are working on an agreement on intelligence cooperation, including sharing satellite data, cybersecurity, electronic warfare, and signal intelligence. But as you see, it is not a no-limits partnership. China won't ask for Russian help in a Taiwan crisis that would undermine its claim of internal affairs. And Russia, it's not about to let Chinese troops operate near its Far East borders or Central Asia. Still, there is one growing area: arms sales. Russia supplies China with advanced systems, air defenses, fighter jets, tech blueprints. But now, Beijing has leverage. With Moscow increasingly isolated, China can negotiate for deeper access, even in the Arctic. In the military realm, China is becoming the senior partner, not through force, but through quiet dependency.
China and Russia aren't allies in traditional sense. They don't have a mutual defense pact, they don't fully trust each other, but they are united by something bigger, a shared dissatisfaction with the US-led world order. Let's look at what really drives this partnership and why it is more about shared enemies than shared values.
First, both Moscow and Beijing see US-led military alliances as direct threats. For Russia, NATO expansion is framed as a security threat, even used to justify its invasion of Ukraine under the term indivisible security. For China, it's about Indo-Pacific. Alliances like AUKUS and the Quad are seen as tools of containment aimed at boxing China in.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people.
They reject what they call weaponized values, democracy, human rights, liberal norms. Russia and China argue that these are just excuses for Western interference. From Iraq to Libya to Hong Kong, they claim the West only promotes values when it's convenient and when it suits their geopolitical goals. In the global south, these complaints resonate. Chinese state media often repeats Russian talking points, painting the West as destabilizing and hypocritical. Third, money. More specifically, the US dollar. Both countries are fed up with the US using its currency dominance as a political weapon. After sanctions over Crimea and again after the Ukraine war, Russia was locked out of Western finance. Now, China and Russia are pushing hard to de-dollarize. They are trading more in yuan and rubles. They are even promoting their own systems in BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But here is what makes it interesting. They don't want to destroy the global economic system. They want to reshape it. They still need global trade. They still want investment. They just don't want the political strings that come with it.
So it is not about tearing down the system, it is about rewriting the rules to benefit rising powers. China and Russia want less US dominance, not necessarily less globalization.
Another dynamic of Chinese-Russian relations is ideological. There is a shared worldview here. Both regimes are authoritarian. Both hate being lectured about democracy or human rights. They never criticize each other's domestic politics. They veto Western human rights resolutions. They oppose internet freedom, regime change, and humanitarian intervention. Xi and Putin use each other as political cover. They can point to their partnership and say, "See, we are not isolated, we are not alone. This is a multipolar world now." They don't just cooperate, they validate each other.
This is not a marriage of love, it is a marriage of revisionism built on shared resentment, not shared values. And like many other marriages of convenience, it works, as long as neither side asks for too much. For all the public handshakes and warm rhetoric, the truth is this partnership has limits, serious ones, and the cracks are starting to showing up. The foundation of this relationship is not that strong. It is built on mutual need but increasingly strained by mistrust, power imbalance, and diverging goals.
Russia's war in Ukraine has revealed just how vulnerable Moscow really is. Yes, Russia has occupied large parts of Ukrainian territory and its forces are still pushing forward, but these gains have come at a massive cost. Take June 2025 for example, a Ukrainian drone strike destroyed dozens of strategic Russian bombers deep inside Russian territory, far from the front lines. It was a clear demonstration of Ukraine's growing technological edge, precision operations, and strong intelligence. This wasn't the first time Ukraine landed a major blow. Earlier drone attacks badly damaged Russia's Black Sea fleet. Add to that the Wagner mutiny in 2023, rising unrest inside Russia, and attacks on Russian soil. Together, they have cracked the myth of Russian invincibility. Some Chinese experts even now publicly question whether Russia can win at all.
Some voices are even calling for China to go back to its old policy of non-alignment. But this is not what true allies say, this is what uncertain partners say, right? But from Chinese perspective, if Russia is struggling to handle Ukraine, how could it possibly stand up to the United States? How could Russia balance against the American power? How could Russian army can help China against the US military power?
But this isn't just about Russia losing. It's about China paying the price for standing next to it. In Europe, public opinion has turned sharply against Beijing. Polls show growing support for decoupling, even if it hurts economically. US allies in Asia are doubling down on defense. Japan is boosting its military. Australia is leaning harder into AUKUS. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has raised fear of Chinese power. If Russia can invade a country and annex its territories, China can do the same. Taiwan might be next. The no limit slogan has become a liability and Beijing knows it.
Beijing wanted strategic influence and bigger share from the pie, but what is getting is more global suspicion, especially in the West.
Strong UK-China relationship is important.
Here is the reality. China trades more with Europe and the US than it ever will with Russia. Yes, 22% of Russian trade is with China, but Russia makes up only 4% of China's. Even that $240 billion trade record is slowing. Chinese banks are pulling back, afraid of getting caught in Western sanctions. And when it comes to deals, Beijing dictates the terms. Just look at the new Siberian pipeline, paid in yuan, priced on China's terms with zero long-term guarantees. Russia's invasion of Ukraine didn't just affect Europe, it globalized the Taiwan issue. What used to be a regional dispute is now seen as a global flashpoint. One invasion has made another seem not just possible but probable. For China, that means the cost of war has gone up, and aligning with Russia too closely only adds risk. Even before the war, Russia was drifting into junior partner status. Now that drift is turning into dependence. China sets the price, the currency, the terms.
And what's stopping Beijing from demanding more? It can ask Russia to cut ties with India, or it can ask a stronger Russian commitment to Chinese position, especially on Taiwan or South China Sea.
As Russia weakens, it loses its leverage, and China gains options. Russian strategy is about destruction, breaking the old system by force. China's is about transformation, rising within the system, taking the lead, then rewriting the rules.
They coordinate, but they don't commit. No guarantees for Taiwan, no help for Ukraine. They hold joint drills, but there is no joint war plans. There is no military pact, no trust.
Russian elites are still wary of China's rise, and China is keeping Moscow close, but always at arm's length. A leaked Russian intelligence document reveals deep distrust between Russia and China. It says China is seen as a national threat, sneaking into Russian bureaucracy, stealing advanced industrial secrets, spying on Russia's military actions in Ukraine, and running other espionage operations inside Russia.
So where does this leave us? A partnership, yes, but a conditional one. China and Russia are united in discontent, but divided by ambition. The more Russia declines, the more cautious China becomes, the more powerful China gets, the more it looks like a leader and Russia like a client.
I am never one that says the United States can't survive even apart from the rest of the world, but it would be a much more dangerous world. And the other point of the matter, if the Chinese and the Russians got back together again, in what position does that put Japan?
In the 1970s, Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger pulled off one of the boldest moves in Cold War history, opening ties with Mao's China and isolating the Soviet Union. Some believe that one move helped US win the Cold War. So today people are asking, can the US do it again, but in reverse? What if the United States could split Russia from China? What if Putin was the next Mao, ready to flip sides? Tempting idea. But reality, not so simple.
The one thing, and I had a professor at the Wharton School of Finance, but we had history classes also. He said the one thing you never want to happen is you never want Russia and China uniting. We united them because of the oil. We united them. Biden united them. It's a shame. The stupidity of what they've done. Well, I'm going to have to ununite them, and I think I can do that too. I have to ununite them.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has floated the idea during a Senate hearing. Keep diplomatic channels open, he says, to stop Moscow from becoming fully dependent on Beijing. On paper, it makes sense, but in practice, it's nearly impossible. The world of 2025 is not the world of 1972. Nixon and Kissinger didn't create the rift between China and the Soviets. It was already there, with border clashes over disputed areas. The US just played it smart and used that split to their advantage. Is there a similar divide between China and Russia now? Sort of, but it's not as big. Things today are very different from the Cold War. China isn't weak or isolated. Russia isn't looking for escape. Xi and Putin has close personal relations. They have met nearly 40 times since 2012. Their partnership isn't just reactive, it's strategic. Even Trump's recent moves haven't changed much. He has offered Putin to ease sanctions, hinted at Ukraine concessions and shaken NATO's unity. But Putin, he is pushing for more, stopping weapons to Ukraine, limiting intelligence, even swapping out Kyiv's leadership. Putin is not exactly itching to ditch Xi for Trump. Besides, the US can't offer Russia what China can. No long-term energy deals, no defense cooperation, no stable, sanction-proof investment. Unlike energy-hungry China, the US is energy self-sufficient, so it does not need Russian gas. American companies don't trust Russia, and for good reason. ExxonMobil learned that the hard way in 2022. Also, even if a rapprochement occurs between US and Russia, China has still more leverage over Russia. It can activate pipelines, supply drone components, and prop up Russia's defense industry.
Trying to woo Putin wouldn't make him an American partner. It would make him a pivot player, swinging between China and the United States to extract maximum favors from both. Unlike Cold War, there is no obvious benefits for the US to offset those costs.
The Nixon-Kissinger playbook worked in a different time, with different powers and different stakes.
So, today's challenge for Washington isn't a three-body problem, it's a Chinese-Russian partnership against a common enemy, which is the United States. So, US needs more than clever diplomacy to split China and Russia.
Last year, China's ambassador to the European Union said it plainly. The no-limits partnership with Russia is just rhetoric. But rhetoric matters, especially when it's backed by pipelines, weapons, and vetoes at the UN. Despite all the cracks we have explored, asymmetry, mistrust, diverging goals, Beijing isn't just walking away from Moscow anytime soon. China shares 4,200 kilometers border with Russia. Why would it want that neighbor to collapse or turn hostile? And don't forget, Xi Jinping has personally invested in this relationship. He has met Putin 40 times, more than any other world leader. Publicly reversing course would cost him face at home and credibility abroad. So yes, this partnership will endure, but we shouldn't exaggerate it. It's real, but it's also fragile. Powerful enough to disrupt the global order, but not remake it. They will support each other where it helps, but only up to a point. China will buy cheap Russian oil, sell Huawei tech, and push the renminbi into Eurasia, but it won't rescue Russia's broken economy or risk its own growth. So, No Limits Partnership helps China and Russia to multiply their power against the US. Yet there are challenges. Beijing doesn't want Russia's economic and military messes pulling it down, while Moscow is wary of leaning too hard on China.
The China-Russia partnership is here to stay, but it is not made of steel. It's held together by caution, convenience, and shared grievances. The real question is, How long can a fragile alliance hold in a world full of storms?